The laughter started before she even reached the elevator. Nadia heard it first. That particular kind, the kind that isn't trying to be quiet. The kind that wants to be heard. She kept her head down and pushed the housekeeping cart forward. One of the wheels had a wobble in it that made a rhythmic thump against the marble floor of the Harrington Grand's lobby, and that sound, too, seemed to amuse them. "There she goes," said the young man in the navy blazer. His name was Corbin Waite, and he was 26 years old, and he had been working at the hotel's guest relations desk for 11 months. He said it the way you'd say, "There goes the mail truck." Something predictable. Something beneath notice. The woman beside him, Petra Finch, didn't even look up from her phone. Does she always take that exact same route? Every single morning? Every single morning, Corbin confirmed. A third voice, Ashton Reed from concierge, leaning against the marble pillar with his arms crossed, said, "What is she like, 50, 60? My grandma moves faster than that." Petra finally looked up. She watched the woman with the cart, the small brown woman in the gray uniform, moving slowly but steadily across the lobby, and said, "She's probably been doing this since before we were born. Honestly, I don't know why Mr. Lennox keeps her on. She can barely lift the supply bags." "She probably can't lift the supply bags," Corbin said, and he laughed again, and Petra laughed, and Ashton pushed off from the pillar and laughed too, and none of them lowered their voices. The woman with the cart did not stop. She did not look at them. She turned the corner toward the service hallway, and the thump, thump, thump of the wobbly wheel faded. And the three of them went back to whatever they had been doing before she interrupted their morning by simply existing. Her name was Cecile Beaumont Okafor. She was 31 years old. Nobody at the Harrington Grand knew very much about Cecile. That was, in part, because nobody had tried to find out. She had been coming in through the service entrance every morning for the past 6 weeks, arriving at 5:45, clocking in under the name C. Beaumont, signing the part-time housekeeping roster with a small, unremarkable signature. She wore the standard-issue gray uniform. She kept her locks pulled back under the required cap. She carried her own spray bottle of cleaning solution, a detail that housekeeping supervisor Rhonda Pace had noted as slightly unusual, but not unusual enough to ask about. What Rhonda had noted and mentioned to Petra over coffee one afternoon was that Cecile worked slowly, not carelessly, slowly, methodically. She would stand in a hotel room doorway for a full minute before entering, looking at something. The carpet, the arrangement of the furniture, the way light fell across the bathroom tiles, before she began. She took notes in a small green notebook she kept in her apron pocket. She asked questions that other housekeeping staff didn't ask. Who reported this stain? How long ago? Was the guest a repeat visitor? "She's weird," Rhonda told Petra. "She's slow," Petra said. "Both," Rhonda agreed. Neither of them thought to wonder why a woman in a housekeeping uniform was taking detailed notes about the condition of every room she cleaned. The incident with the luggage cart happened on a Tuesday. Cecile had been transferring a set of cleaning supplies from the service elevator to the 4th floor linen station when one of the supply bags slipped. It wasn't a dramatic fall. The bag caught on the cart's edge and slid down slowly. But it was enough to spill a box of individually wrapped soap bars across the hallway floor. She crouched down to collect them. Ashton came off the elevator 2 minutes later, escorting a guest to his room, and saw her there on one knee on the carpet, gathering soap bars one by one. He said nothing to her, but after the guest was settled and he was back at the elevator, he took out his phone and photographed it. The gray uniform, the scattered soap, the bent posture, and sent it to the staff group chat with the caption, "Day in the life of our slowest employee lol." The group chat had 22 members. 14 of them responded with laughing emojis. 3 sent nothing. 2 said, "Stop it." 3 did not see the message until later. One of those 3 was Rhonda, who saw it that evening and felt briefly uncomfortable before putting her phone down and going to make dinner. Cecile did not have access to the staff group chat. She was part-time. She was not in the loop. She finished gathering the soap bars, restocked the linen station, completed her notes for the fourth floor, and clocked out at 2:15 in the afternoon. On her way through the lobby, she passed Corbin at the guest relations desk. He glanced up at her, then away, the way you glance at furniture. She pushed through the service door and into the afternoon light. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, and if you had been watching her face, you might have seen something there. Not anger, not hurt, but something careful. Something measuring. She took out the green notebook and wrote 3 words in it. Then she walked to the parking garage and got into a white Lexus that cost more than Corbin made in a year. There is something particular about being underestimated. Anyone who has experienced it will tell you, it is not simply painful. It is clarifying. It shows you, with a precision that flattery never could, exactly who the people around you are when they believe there are no consequences. Cecile Beaumont Okafor had learned this a long time ago. She had learned it at 23, when she'd walked into her first investor meeting in a skirt suit and been handed the coffee order. She had learned it at 26, when she'd submitted a proposal under her initials, C.J. Beaumont, and been told it was the strongest pitch we've seen this quarter, only to watch the room's temperature drop. When she walked in and they understood that C.J. was not a man. She had learned it at 29, when a business partner she had trusted had moved to cut her out of her own company, confident she wouldn't know how to fight back. She had fought back. She had won. The company was called Beaumont Hospitality Group, and it owned, among other things, the Harrington Grand Hotel, which Cecile had acquired 18 months ago as part of a portfolio expansion that had made the front page of 3 industry publications. The general manager of the Harrington Grand was a man named Roger Kessler, who had been in his position for 4 years and who believed, sincerely, that the hotel ran as well as it did because of his leadership. He was not entirely wrong, but he had never, in 4 years, spent a single day working as housekeeping staff. He had never seen the Harrington Grand from below. Cecile had. She had not planned it as a punishment. She wanted to be clear about that later. Not that she explained herself often, but when she did, she was precise. What had happened was this. The guest satisfaction surveys for the Harrington Grand had been declining for 7 months. Not catastrophically. Not in any way that would trigger alarm. But Cecile read every property report herself. Another habit her CFO found excessive and her board had learned not to argue about. And she had noticed the pattern. The scores for staff attentiveness were slipping. The scores for atmosphere were flat when they should have been climbing. 3 recent reviews on travel sites had used variations of the phrase the staff seemed more interested in each other than in the guests. Roger had a theory. The market was changing. Expectations were shifting. There was a generational gap in what guests considered attentive service. He had put together a PowerPoint about it. Cecile had a different theory. She wanted to test it. She had done this before at other properties. She called it a ground-level review, and she always did it herself, and she always went in as something invisible. Maintenance staff, kitchen prep, the loading dock. People spoke freely around invisible people. They showed you exactly what they were. She had not expected it to be quite as clear as this. By the end of week 2, she had filled 12 pages of the green notebook. Some of it was operational. A supply storage issue on the 3rd floor, an elevator that needed recalibration, a linen rotation schedule that had somehow gotten compressed in a way that was creating unnecessary work for the housekeeping team. Those things she noted clinically. But there were other things. The way Corbin spoke to the older members of the housekeeping staff. Not rudely, exactly, but with a particular tone, the way you speak to someone when you have decided they can't really hear you, or don't really matter. The way Petra moved through the lobby, as though any interaction with a non-guest employee was an imposition. The way Ashton narrated the failures of colleagues. Did you see her take 40 minutes on that checkout room? 40 minutes. I could have done it in 15, without any apparent awareness that the colleagues he was discussing were standing within earshot. And there was the group chat. She hadn't been able to see it directly, but she'd found out about the photograph within 24 hours through a housekeeper named Winnie, who was 63 years old and had been with the Harrington Grand for 9 years, and who came to find Cecile on the 4th floor, quietly, furious, to tell her what had been sent around. "You should report it," Winnie said. Cecile looked at her for a moment. "I will," she said, "I promise." Winnie studied her. She had been cleaning hotel rooms for 30 years, and she had a fine-tuned radar for when someone was saying what you wanted to hear versus when they meant it. Something about this one. The careful eyes, the green notebook, the questions nobody else asked, made her choose to believe it. "All right," Winnie said, and went back to her cart. In the gray uniform, started the same way every other morning had started. She came through the service entrance at 5:85. She signed the roster as C. Beaumont. She collected her cart and started toward the elevator. Corbin was already at his desk. He'd come in early to cover a gap in scheduling, and he saw her cross the lobby and made a small sound of amusement and turned back to his computer. Petra wasn't in yet. Ashton was somewhere on the upper floors. Cecile completed her rounds. She cleaned 4 rooms, finished her documentation of the 3rd floor supply issue, had a brief conversation with the night shift laundry staff about the linen schedule problem, and took a few final notes. Then she returned her cart to the storage room, removed her apron, and placed the gray uniform cap on top of the cart with the kind of deliberateness that suggested she was not coming back for it. She walked to the service elevator. She rode it to the executive floor. She had a key card in her jacket pocket. Not a housekeeping key card, the other one, and she used it to enter the executive corridor. At the end of the hall was a conference room that Roger Kessler used for his weekly leadership meetings. She sat down at the head of the table, opened her laptop, and began making calls. The first call was to her director of operations. The second was to the Harrington Grand's head of human resources, a woman named Clara Beats, who sounded confused for the first several seconds of the call, and then very, very not confused. "I need you here this afternoon," Cecile said. "Bring the personnel files." "Yes," Clara said. "Of course, I'll be there by 2. Roger Kessler arrived at his Tuesday morning leadership meeting to find someone already sitting at the head of his conference table. He did not immediately recognize her. That was the honest truth of it, and it would embarrass him later, in a way he couldn't quite articulate. He had seen Cecile Beaumont Okafor's photograph in the company materials. He'd been briefed on her when the acquisition finalized. He had even technically been scheduled for a site visit from ownership that he knew was overdue. But his brain, in that first moment, processed "woman I don't know in my conference room, and not owner of this property." There was a half-second where he opened his mouth to say something that would have been very difficult to walk back. She looked up from her laptop and said, "Good morning, Roger. Close the door, please." He closed the door. She introduced herself, not because she thought he didn't know who she was, but because she believed in beginning things clearly. "I'm Cecile Beaumont Okafor. I own the Harrington Grand. I've been on property for the past 6 weeks conducting a ground-level review. I have some findings I'd like to walk you through." Roger sat down. He was a man who had spent 22 years in hotel management, and he had a good instinct for moments when something serious was happening, and every instinct he had was firing at once. "Of course," he said. She walked him through the operational issues first. The elevator, the supply chain compression, the linen schedule. These were genuinely fixable things, and she said so, and she had recommendations for each one. Roger took notes. He was relieved, for a few minutes, to have something concrete to write. Then she turned a page in the green notebook and said, "Now I'd like to talk to you about your guest relations team." Corbin Waite's Tuesday afternoon started like any other. He had a good morning. Easy crowd, guest check-ins running smooth, and he was in a relaxed mood by the time his manager, Lissa Drake, came to find him at his desk at 3:15 and asked him to come to HR. He thought it was about the scheduling dispute from last week. He was not worried. Clara Beats was in the HR office. A woman he didn't recognize was sitting to the side, not behind the desk, not at the head of anything, just in a chair near the window, a green notebook in her lap, watching. Clara placed a printed photograph on the desk between them. It was a screenshot of the staff group chat, his message, his name, his photograph of the housekeeper on one knee, collecting soap bars from the carpet, accompanied by his caption. "Can you tell me about this?" Clara said. Corbin looked at the photograph. He felt the floor shift in a way he recognized from much younger years, from moments when the thing you'd assumed was private turned out not to be. That was. He stopped, started again. It was a joke. Internal. Just. We all have group chats. It wasn't meant to be. It was sent to 22 members of staff, Clara said. It depicts a colleague in a vulnerable position, was accompanied by a mocking caption, and has been confirmed as representative of a broader pattern of behavior toward housekeeping staff documented over the past several weeks. Corbin's eyes moved involuntarily to the woman by the window. Cecile looked back at him steadily. She did not look angry. She did not look like she was enjoying this. She looked like someone who had gone somewhere difficult and returned with exactly what she needed. The woman in that photograph. "Clarice," said, "is Miss Cecile Beaumont Okafor. She is the owner of this hotel." The silence that followed was the particular kind of silence that comes after something irreversible. Corbin Waite did not say anything for a very long time. Petra Finch had a similar meeting at 4 o'clock. Ashton Reed had his at 4:45. They each had different responses. Petra cried, not, Cecile thought, from genuine remorse, but from fear, which was its own kind of information. Ashton went quiet, and then, surprisingly, said, "I knew it was wrong when I did it. I don't know why I did it anyway." That, Cecile noted in the green notebook afterward, was the most honest thing she'd heard from anyone in guest relations all week. By 5 o'clock, the decisions had been made. Corbin and Petra were terminated, effective immediately. Their behavior toward colleagues had been sustained, documented, and deliberately humiliating. There was no remediation path that Clara could credibly recommend, and Cecile did not push for one. Ashton Reed was placed on a formal performance improvement plan. The acknowledgement had meant something, and she wasn't sure yet whether it would mean more. She would watch. Roger Kessler kept his position with the understanding that the next quarterly review would be a different kind of conversation than he was accustomed to. His leadership had not created the culture problem directly, but he had not seen it either, and not seeing was its own failure. He understood this. He said so. She appreciated that he said so. The person she spent the most time thinking about was not any of them. On her last day in the gray uniform, just before she had gone up to the executive floor, she had stopped at the 4th-floor linen station Winnie station. Winnie was there, folding towels with the precise, practiced motions of someone who had done this particular task. More times than she'd ever tried to count, Cecile had stood in the doorway for a moment. Winnie looked up. Something shifted in her face, not recognition, not quite, but something like the beginning of it. "I wanted to thank you," Cecile said, "for telling me about the photograph." Winnie set down the towel she was holding. She looked at Cecile for a long moment, at the jacket, the keycard visible in the breast pocket, the absence of an apron. "You're not housekeeping," Winnie said. It was not quite a question. "No," Cecile said. Winnie was quiet. "Then how long?" 6 weeks. "And you?" Winnie paused. Recalibrated. "Are you the one who called Clara Beats?" "Yes." Another pause, longer. Winnie picked up the towel again, slowly, and folded it. Then she said, in a voice that was carefully controlled, "Corbin." "The one with the photograph." "Handled," Cecile said. Winnie nodded. She didn't ask for more detail than that. She had spent 9 years learning not to need more detail than that, because details rarely came and you adjusted. But her hands had gone still on the towel. "I also need to talk to you about something else," Cecile said. "There's going to be a new position, housekeeping quality and operations, overseeing the supply chain, the rotation scheduling, the training protocols for new staff. It's a management-level role. I'd like you to consider it." Winnie looked up. "You know this floor better than anyone I've met," Cecile said, "and you were the only person in this building, in 6 weeks, who saw something wrong and came to tell someone about it. That's not a small thing." The silence between them was a different kind of silence than the one in the HR office. Less heavy. More open. "I'm 63 years old," Winnie said finally. "I know," Cecile said. "The role doesn't have an age requirement." Winnie looked at her for a long moment. Then something shifted in her face. Something eased that had been held for a long, long time. The particular kind of easing that comes when someone says the sentence you had stopped expecting anyone to say. "All right," she said. "I'll consider it." The formal announcement came 2 weeks later. The staff received a memo from Roger Kessler, co-signed, for the first time in Harrington Grand history, by Cecile Beaumont Okafor, owner and chairwoman, Beaumont Hospitality Group, introducing a new suite of operational changes, a mandatory hospitality culture training program, and a new management position in housekeeping quality and operations. The name listed was Winifred Ambrose. Most of the staff didn't know who she was. A few of the housekeeping team did, and the word passed through the linen stations and supply rooms in that particular way that news travels when people who've been quiet for a long time finally have something worth saying. She'd been here 9 years and nobody'd ever offered her a chair in the conference room. There is a kind of justice that arrives loudly, with announcements and confrontations and scenes that people talk about for years afterward. And then there is the other kind, the kind that comes quietly, in a gray uniform, with a green notebook and a wobbly cartwheel, and a willingness to spend 6 weeks being invisible, so that everyone around you has the freedom to show you exactly who they are. Cecile Beaumont Okafor had learned, over the course of a decade building and acquiring and protecting what she built, that the second kind is almost always more accurate, and almost always more lasting. She never explained herself to Corbin Waite. She never told Petra Finch what she thought of her. She never had the conversation with Ashton Reed about what he was going to do differently. Those were Roger's conversations to have, and Clara's, and eventually Winnie's. Her conversation, the one she had been moving toward the whole 6 weeks, had ended in a linen room on the 4th floor of a hotel she owned, with a woman who folded towels with the precision of someone who had never let the work make her small. That conversation, she thought, had gone exactly right.